Today we're going to open the Paint Center. So you guys are going to be able to start exploring with paint. And I know that the last couple years you've already learned a little bit about tempera paint and watercolor paint, but we're going to go through some of our new steps. This is where you will get your paint. You're going to use an egg crate for your paint tray or your paint palette. You're going to put paint colors in the tray. The egg cartons are over here in the cubbies. So if you're going to paint with the tempera paint, you're going to want the egg carton. The other option for you are the paint chip plates, which you are very familiar with if you have been with me for the last couple years. So you can use those also to paint. And you can also use the watercolor paints. I don't have those out today, but they are over here. And you guys remember, they're in the little cups. I'm not going to demo these today, but if you remember, we use them the same way, the red, the yellow, the blue, and we mix the colors together and we don't contaminate them and keep them clean. So that's where the watercolor paints live. Today I'm going to work with the tempera paint. Over at our paint area, you'll notice that our paintbrushes are labeled, but I want to talk to you guys a little bit too about paintbrushes. A watercolor paintbrush is very fluffy and soft, and it's usually puffy, big like this, because you want it to hold a lot of water to hold the paint. Do not use the watercolor paintbrushes with tempera paint. The results will not be nice. Tempera paintbrushes are stiffer bristle brushes like this one here, or these pointed brown ones that they're a little bit stiffer. They're not as puffy as a watercolor brush. These blue handled brushes you can actually use with tempera or watercolor paint. So I'm going to take one of each of those. When I paint, I fill my tray up with the colors I need. I want to take a wet rag. These are wet rags. Maybe back with me, just in case my paintbrush gets full of water, paint. And then I need a cup of water to rinse my brush. Clean water is always in the blue pitcher, not dirty water. You dump dirty water in the dirty water bucket. So I have my cup of water, my paint, my brushes. Good painting paper, you guys know, is in the drawer right over here. And then I'm going to go back to my seat. Okay, so when we paint, artists, with the tempera paint, we want to start with things in the background first and work our way forward. With watercolor paint, it's different. It'd be the opposite. You want to work with things in the front and paint the things in the back. Because with tempera paint, you can paint over. Tempera paint will cover over. It's opaque. Watercolor paint's transparent. With watercolor paint, I also like to sketch it out lightly with pencil first, or use a black crayon. Tempera paint, not so much. So I just dive right in. Always get your paintbrush wet first. I'm going to start up here in the sky and make some nice clouds. So I'm going to use a little bit of blue paint, and you just dip the tip of your paintbrush. You don't need paint up here. I'm going to start just kind of laying in my sky, working around where the shapes of the clouds might be, just kind of randomly using my brush, moving my brush. So, it looks like those would be some fun clouds down here. Notice how it's darker underneath the cloud. So I might just kind of clean my brush off down here to make that darker mark. I don't need to rinse my paintbrush. Just going to put a little white on here and start making my clouds. And I'm just kind of pushing my brush. This is the one time that I will allow you guys to push the brush. I know I'm always saying, don't push the brush. Nobody likes to be pushed around. But with these real stiff, bristly brushes, it's okay to kind of push them because it's going to give you a fun texture like a cloud. Now I'm just working with the white paint and letting it work with some of the blue that's already on here and a little blue that it might catch up here to create my clouds. Think about light colors against dark colors. We're creating contrast. So that's what's going to make my clouds look like clouds. The lower they get, the darker they're going to be, just like in the picture there. So I get my clouds laid in. I'm working very quickly. And there's the bottom of my clouds. Now I'm gonna put some mountains back here. So, I'm looking at the mountains. They're not really black. They're kind of a purple color. So again, I might start with my blue and lay in what might be the horizon line. And maybe I'm going to put a little bit of magenta on there because like I said, those mountains look purple to me. And I'm just kind of working my paintbrush back and forth and moving the paint around so there are not big globs, and laying the colors right on top of one another. So I'm mixing the colors on my paper. Notice how the magenta goes down and then a little cyan on top. So I'm blending those colors together on my paper. And again, because I'm working from the background to the foreground, I don't have to worry about exactly where my mountains end, because my trees, I'll just paint right on top. So I might fill this in just a tad bit more because I see green now here. So I'm going to use some blue and then put some of the yellow on top. Now, have I rinsed my paintbrush yet? Nope, you're right. Good job, artists. I haven't rinsed my paintbrush because I'm using all that beautiful paint as I go. And again, blue here. There's a lot of green. So I'm just laying in that color and pulling it down. I'm not worrying about detail at this point because that is the last thing I want to do. Now, over here, it's a little bit darker. There's a shadow. So now I'm going to try to make a darker green to kind of create a shadow. Maybe that's where a cloud is. And now I'm going to add just a smidge of black to darken it. Now I'm going to rinse my brush because I actually had too much paint on there. I'm going to wipe it on the rag. And now I'm just going to soften it or blend that shadow in. So it looks like a little shadow there. And then when I start doing my detail of the flowers, I'm just going to pretend that this is all painted. So then when I do the detail of flowers, I'm just kind of using a little bit more paint, and I'm coming in here and laying those flowers right on top of my green. And maybe I want to add some white. And again, I'm just mixing and blending those colors together as I work. All right, artists, explore, experiment with the paint, and make a beautiful picture. Have fun. Okay, so artists, after you're done with your painting, you will need to obviously have your name on it somewhere, and you can do it a couple ways. You can scratch it if the paint's wet, or write it on the back, and your teacher code, please. And then it needs to go on a drying rack or in the other room. I'll tell you where to put it. And then it's time to clean up. So once you put your painting away, and your reference photo if you had one, the first thing you're going to notice is there's probably paint on the table. So use your wet rag and pick up that paint, please. The person who sits there next would really appreciate it. And then you're going to take your paintbrush and rinse it really well in your cup of water. Remember, it wants to swim at the bottom of the cup 4 or 5 times. Take it out, wipe it on your rag. Don't just do this. Wipe the handle, wipe the whole paintbrush. If it's still dirty, over at the supply area, you can use the second rinse container if your paintbrush needs a second rinse. Squish it around in there. Once it's clean, again, wipe it and then put it back, bristles up. Dirty water, in the dirty water bucket, water cup over here, wet rag here, dry rag here, dry your hands. If you have a lot of leftover paint and your palette is still clean, please just leave it at the supply area for the next group of students. And we're done cleaning up. Everything's in order. Have a great day.